cybercrime.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. So the presentation is called Cybercrime Friendly Sales Policy. So why cybercrime friendly? There's actually a long discussion among cybersecurity professionals, also in the CERT community, that free or cheap services are pure attraction for cyber criminals, and it is wrong to provide something like SSL certificates free of charge, for example. But the idea behind that actually is good. It's meant for good people, for good guys, so they are able to protect their environment, their resources with SSL. But obviously someone is able to abuse it as well. So another question is, are low-cost domains and other resources like hosting, etc., are they acting as a pure attraction for cyber criminals? And this is, again, something that we are trying to understand, whether it's true or no. And cryptocurrency, or methods of payment, how they change the game. Also when we try to analyze the hosting providers and ISPs that are involved in the data set, we're trying to understand whether they accept these anonymized payment methods. Some of the previous speakers, they mentioned things like BCP 38 and good practices and liability regulations and stuff like that. I'll be touching upon that as well. And so IP source address spoofing is definitely something that is attractive as a service if it's there. Maybe they're not selling it straight away as a service, but people are able to check whether it's there or no. So to get these answers, we needed a data set. So obviously, we as a national and governmental CERT have some partners in CERT community that we were able to ask for this data set, and we have something of our own as well. So the indicators of compromise was something that we worked with, like IP addresses, DNS, so the main names and URLs, which at the end of the day is anyway IP address or domain name. Hosting companies like organization name, autonomous system number, do they accept cryptocurrency or no? As I mentioned, in historical data sets. This is something also very important to get these answers, because if you look only on the present time, you might miss something, because the infrastructure changes quite dynamically. So things like passive DNS, passive Whois databases, and passive SSL are also very crucial in this case. So these are the organizations and frameworks that we cooperated with to get the information for the analysis. And it's a Europol, obviously ourselves, CERT.LV, and malware information sharing platform, which is actually a distributed project run by CERT community and mainly by Circle, which is a CERT team in Luxembourg, and malware information sharing platform from NATO and CERT. So we gathered the IOCs from these platforms and additional data set from one big cyber offensive operation that Europol was investigating in cooperation with one European state. So we looked at domain names that might be considered as cheap. So the price range up to $5 per year. And we're trying to map them on the IOC list that we got from our partners in our own data sets. So there are some safeguard and mitigation processes that are introduced in DNS community, and some of them are doing pretty well, but some of them seem to be quite weird also. So I'm gonna be showing you how we faced some obstacles during the analysis or data gathering also with things like Whois, which is like ancient stuff that is there for ages, but apparently it's not that simple anyway. So common terms of service would be really nice if all the registries or people involved in the domain business would have, and then law enforcement agencies, CERT community would be able to figure out how to work with these cases to either shut down the domain or influence somehow the cybercrime environment, and they wouldn't need a team of lawyers behind their back to help them in every case, because the legislation differs from country to country. Those terms of services differ also within the Europe, which is again a little bit weird. And it seems that there are some regulations, and ICANN is doing something, but I guess it's like a friendly club where old friends are better than the new friends, and I'll show what I mean a little bit later with that. And the common Whois requirements, and this is important if you use the Whois database just for looking up some information on a resource like IP address or domain name, and if you do it like a human, like a normal human being, then it's okay as it is now. But if you would like to introduce some machine processing, then it's not that easy, because the format differs, the fields, they are called differently, information amount differs, etc. So it's a free text format, basically. And we thought that it's not regulated at all, but apparently it is. So ICANN has an initiative, or actually a standard, which is applicable to all the registries that are newcomers since year something. Okay, so again, the initiative probably was good. They have standardized what Whois information should contain, how it should look like, what fields, etc. So common taxonomy, but they applied it not to all the players, only for the new ones. So what we got there is actually something that my colleague yesterday actually showed me, like a funny thing on standards. So situation there was that we have 14 competing standards. Now those two people meet and they are wondering, okay, we have 14 competing standards. We should figure out one that is applicable to all the cases and solve the issue, right? So quite soon enough they realized that now they have 15 competing standards and nothing has actually changed. And probably it sounds a little bit more skeptical than it was during the Arian's presentation, but this is how we see the reality works, actually. So standards are good, best practices are good, but they are good and effective only when they are respected and someone actually implements them. And if there's no central or regional body that is able to enforce it somehow, then it's useless. And this is what we see with BCP 38, right? The BCP 38 is like 20 years old or something like that, and now we have realized that, okay, we have a global DDoS problem. Everyone is suffering, everyone is fighting with it, someone is earning money from it, and that someone is bad guys and good guys, because good guys are providing scrubbing services, DDoS protection services, etc. So we have a political problem actually there, because you have to have a will, political and economical will, to change these things. And well, apparently there's none at the moment, but people have to. There's a human nature involved in this, and apparently when we get to some critical mass or a critical point that from IoT insecurity in IoT devices, people will suffer, or the financial losses will be so huge that we will have to change something, then it will actually change. And I believe it will. Sometime soon, but it will. Especially with IoT. It shows these problems more significantly than before. So to continue with the analysis of cheap services. So what the research showed is that the dominance or the TLDs that are dominating in the IOC set that we had, it was more than 2 million unique records. It shows that .com, .net, .org, .biz, .info, and .ru are on the top of the list. And this is not because they are bad, but this is because they are, .com is probably the most popular domain. So it is cheap, and criminals use it. What is a little bit even more interesting is that the data set that is shown here, it is different from the concern in the CERT community, because CERT community speaks a lot about problems with TLDs like XYZ and something like that, right? The new ones. But these analyses did not reveal that. But still, it's still there. So this is the same graph, only switched to the other side so that the top ones do not overwhelm the whole information. So then we have EU, Brazil, etc. CC is quite popular. And from the LV TLD, we saw only 115. So I guess it's good for us. What is interesting that .su, which is Soviet Union, some kind of a legacy domain, TLD, which is still maintained, and it's not the cheapest one, but still it was used quite a lot in the cybercrime or offensive operations, and it turned out to be a little bit weird because it's not the cheap stuff. At least we didn't find it for cheap money, and apparently it might be somehow related to I don't know, patriotic feelings or some people that are still missing the Soviet times, and they're kind of trying to show it with this stuff. But cyber criminals tend to use it quite a lot. So this was a domain part. The next thing is SSL, and to be able to analyze it more effectively, we were able to see the passive information or historical data on SSL certificates and the IOCs that match to be serving those SSL certificates. So the idea of passive SSL actually came from WikiLeaks, if I'm not mistaken, and it came originally from GCHQ, and later the CERT community just implemented it. So thanks to GCHQ. But the idea here is that we try to understand whether the Let's Encrypt certificate authority is actually so abused by criminals like people think they are. So what turned out that Let's Encrypt CA is actually only on 74th place if we take a look on the top 100. And the conclusion out of that is that cyber criminals, they are willing to pay. This is one thing, because they have stolen money, stolen credit cards, etc. And the other thing is that there is a huge amount of, still a lot of self-signed certificates. So apparently their operations are still successful, even though you might know that if you visit a web page through a web browser that is where the server is presenting self-signed certificate, you get information. So they are trying to protect you, your being advised not to visit it. But still, people click on it, and there's a social engineering involved, and apparently it's quite successful because they are not trying to switch it away to the legitimate CAs. But it might change quite soon because the Google and with its Chrome browser and Firefox, they are going to be enforcing a new policy which will ban self-signed certificates in all cases. So they were, if we talk about offensive operations where they use a middleman or a distribution layer is with a browser, then it will fail. But if we look on the CNC communication where browser is not needed, then probably it will still remain with the self-sign. But this policy with web browsers, it's actually an indication for all of you to modify accordingly your security policy. So if those big players are actually saying that, okay, we are not working at all with self-signed certificates, then probably you should investigate whether your environment needs to communicate with something that is presenting self-signed SSL. And if not, then you should do the same as Google and Firefox does. And then there's another problem, of course. Criminals can buy those legitimate certificates, but to identify what is happening behind the encryption layer, you have to open it. And this is where the vendors with their fancy boxes come in, but it's solvable. The autonomous system mapping on the IOC chart is also interesting, but some anomalies came up, and one of several that are worth mentioning is that there are a lot of bogus networks involved, and the reason might be also, there might be several reasons. One reason might be that some of them are sinkholed and pointing to local host, for example. Another reason might be that there are some kind of internal domains or just taken off by pointing them to the bogus network. But it might be a criminal activity as well. And another anomaly, which is even more interesting, is that one of the top guys was Gaz Invest Project autonomous system, which came up. And why it is interesting, one thing is the name, right? The other thing is that the networks from this autonomous system are actually not advertised. They're not advertised by the owner. And in some cases, RIPE noticed that the network was advertised from Greece. So my speculation is that possibly this autonomous system, because it's not used actively, either it is used by malicious actor from very beginning, or it is hijacked by malicious actor and used for their operations every now and then just because they can hijack it. So I think it was a quite interesting discovery from the whole data set. Now the payment part, as I mentioned, the anonymity and cryptocurrencies. This is one example from a Lithuanian hosting provider, which apparently accepts anything as a payment method. But it was interesting. No cryptocurrencies here. That's a good thing. But like all the supply chains of supermarkets, loyalty cards, stuff like that. Really interesting approach. This is one hosting provider that I have not mentioned in the name, but it is actively used by threat actors, also APT, and they are accepting cryptocurrencies. And this is just one example, but a lot of them, majority of them that are falling in this cybercrime friendly environment, they are accepting cryptocurrency. So this is clearly an indicator that I'm not saying that cryptocurrency is bad by design by definition, but it is a tool that people can use to hide themselves. So this is something to note. And this is quite new thing, and I think it shows also the problem that there's no central body that is able to stop things and regulate things. That FKTK is a bank regulator that was asked whether the cryptocurrency is acceptable or no, and they didn't have a clear answer. They had an answer that is suggesting something. And also our national airline is accepting cryptocurrency. Is that okay or no? Do government agencies have to accept cryptocurrencies or no? And is there any organization in the European Union that would be able to answer that question? This is something that came up as well. So the results, they did not show the overwhelming abuse of those low-cost resources. However, there are some indications that cheap domain names, if your domain name selling policy is run on the cheap ones, then it's attractive for cyber criminals. VPS hosting that is accepting cryptocurrencies, it is attracting cyber criminals. Free SSL, not yet, as I said, but with this change of policy in Chrome and Firefox, it might be. Malware hosting tourism is also an interesting thing, because Ukraine comes up every now and then. I think it is because they have a lot more bigger problems than cybercrime at some point, and cyber criminals notice that and abuse their infrastructure because it's good at that point. So in the policy and regulations, I think it's good, it's useful, but it has to be forced somehow, and not only by force, but for example, if the ISPs would implement BCP 38, then the regulator might push it, and if they do not comply, they take away the license. And if they do comply, they get some benefits like discount on taxes, for example. Just an idea. But there has to be some carrot and stick mechanism. Otherwise, something like 20 years and BCP 38 is still a dream far away. And with IoT, it's even more critical. So thank you, and I'll be happy to take some questions if you have some.
Questions? Maybe you will have questions. I have a few questions written down. So what is the essential problem with the Whois data when we're considering the incident response and tackling the cybercrime?
So the problem is that the format is not common, and I guess even bigger problem is the new data protection regulation that is introduced in Europe, because now I'm not sure if the email address will be publicly available in the Whois data. For example, if I publish it as Varis.Teivans at CERT.LV in the Whois information, is that my private data, right? So this is one problem, that the format differs, and when you need to involve the Whois data in threat intelligence process, you have to parse it through the machine, and if it's not machine readable format, then it creates some problems for the good guys, actually. And again, normalizing the information, and I have heard from Michael from Switch that there's an initiative in ICANN or among the DNS people that there will be a change, that it will be a service per subscription, so that law enforcement will get authentication to the Whois database, will get some big data set, and everything that is publicly available will be smaller. Maybe it's a solution. Maybe it's a way to go.
One more question from my side. Would you say that for the regular users, regular owners of services, is it okay to use services that also host for free, like free domains or the free SSL? Is it okay for the end users, for customers to use those services?
Well, the idea behind it is good. It's good to have a protection which is SSL. It's one part of a protection, but if we see an overwhelming abuse of it, then probably there are some regulations, and regulation is also a price. So I'm not advocating that everything should be for sale for some big money, but it is a mechanism. So the answer is yes, you should use free tools as long as they're available to protect you.
Well, thank you. Let's give then applause if there are no questions.